You tell yourself you're just not a confrontational person. You let the comments slide. You swallow the frustration. You rewrite the text message 3 times so it doesn't sound too harsh. You say, "It's fine," when it's not fine. You smile in meetings while someone takes credit for your idea. You stay quiet when your partner crosses a line. You convince yourself it's maturity. But later that night, when you're alone, your mind replays everything. What you should have said, what you wish you had said, the version of you that stood up straight and spoke clearly. And here's the part no one talks about. Avoiding conflict doesn't make the tension disappear. It just relocates it from the room into your body. If that hits something in you, stay with me, because what we're about to unpack isn't about becoming aggressive. It's about understanding why your nervous system treats disagreement like danger, and how that silent pattern might be quietly shaping your entire life.
And before we go deeper, if you value psychological insight that most people never slow down enough to understand, this is where you want to be. Subscribe. Not for noise, not for hype, but because the ability to see your own patterns clearly is a competitive advantage in relationships, career, confidence, everything. Most people live inside their wiring. Here, we study it. Now let's talk about you. Somewhere along the way, your brain learned that conflict equals loss. Loss of love, loss of approval, loss of belonging, loss of safety. It may have started early. Maybe when you were a kid and tension in the house meant emotional chaos. Maybe you learned that if you stayed small and agreeable, things stayed calm. Maybe you watched adults argue and felt your stomach drop, your chest tighten, your heart race. Your body cataloged it. Conflict equals threat. Your nervous system doesn't care that you're 32 now, or 45, or 27. It only cares about survival.
When someone raises their voice or even slightly shifts their tone, your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting danger, lights up. It doesn't distinguish between a physical threat and a social one. To your brain, rejection feels like death. Thousands of years ago, being cast out of the tribe meant you didn't survive, so your system evolved to avoid it at all costs. And conflict risks rejection. So you adapt. You become easygoing, flexible, chill. You pride yourself on being low drama. You're the mediator, the peacemaker, the one who says, "Let's just move on." But let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many times have you moved on while resentment stayed? How many relationships have slowly drained you because you never actually expressed what you needed? Avoiding conflict feels like control in the moment, but it often creates a slow leak of self-respect. And that's the part that builds quietly. At work, maybe you don't negotiate your salary because you don't want to make it awkward, so you accept less than you're worth. You tell yourself you're grateful, but every paycheck becomes a subtle reminder that you didn't speak up. In friendships, maybe you tolerate jokes that cross a line. You laugh, everyone laughs, but later you feel small. You tell yourself you're being sensitive, so you say nothing next time too. In romantic relationships, maybe you avoid hard conversations about boundaries, intimacy, or emotional needs. You don't want to start a fight. You don't want to be too much, so you shrink. And over time, something strange happens. You become agreeable on the outside and quietly resentful on the inside. That split is exhausting. Here's what's really happening under the surface. When you avoid conflict, your nervous system is choosing short-term safety over long-term alignment. In the moment, staying silent lowers the immediate threat. No raised voices, no tension, no awkwardness. Your body relaxes. But unresolved tension doesn't vanish. It gets stored in your muscles, in your jaw, in your sleep, in that subtle irritability you can't fully explain. Your brain starts building a validation loop. See, when I stay quiet, I'm safe. So it reinforces the behavior. The more you avoid conflict, the more your identity attaches to being non-confrontational. It becomes part of who you think you are. But here's the question that changes everything. Is that actually who you are, or who you had to become? There's a difference. Some people avoid conflict because they are deeply regulated and confident. They don't react because they don't need to. That's strength.
But many people avoid conflict because they're afraid of what might happen if they speak. That's fear wearing a polite mask. And if you're honest, you know which one feels true for you. Think about the last time someone disappointed you. Did you clearly say, "That didn't sit right with me"? Or did you say, "It's cool," while something inside you tightened? Your body always tells the truth first. Tight chest, dropped stomach, shallow breath. That's your nervous system detecting boundary violation. But then your conditioning steps in. Don't make a scene, don't be dramatic, don't push them away. So you override yourself. And every time you override yourself, you send your brain a subtle message. My comfort matters less than keeping others comfortable. That belief shapes everything. It shapes who you date, it shapes how much you earn, it shapes how people treat you. Because here's an uncomfortable reality. People unconsciously calibrate their behavior based on the boundaries you enforce.
If you never enforce any, they assume there aren't any. This isn't about blaming others. It's about understanding power dynamics. When you avoid conflict consistently, you train people that your limits are flexible, and flexible limits get tested. But I want you to notice something important. Avoiding conflict doesn't mean you're weak. It often means you're highly attuned. You can read micro-expressions. You can sense shifts in tone. You anticipate tension before it happens. That sensitivity is a strength. The problem isn't the sensitivity, it's the interpretation. Your brain interprets tension as catastrophe instead of discomfort. But discomfort is not danger. Let that sink in. Discomfort is not danger. Your nervous system reacts as if disagreement will destroy connection, but in healthy dynamics, honest disagreement deepens connection. It clarifies reality. It builds trust. Think about the people you respect most. Are they silent about everything? Or do they communicate clearly, even when it's awkward? There's a reason confident people seem calm in conflict. It's not because they enjoy confrontation. It's because their identity isn't tied to universal approval. They've decoupled disagreement from rejection. That's the shift. Right now, somewhere deep inside, you might still equate someone being upset with you as you being unsafe. But what if someone being mildly uncomfortable is simply part of adult relationships? What if your fear of conflict is actually fear of abandonment? That's where this gets deeper. For many people, especially those who grew up walking on emotional eggshells, conflict felt unpredictable, and unpredictability feels like chaos, so your brain decided, avoid it at all costs. But as an adult, that same strategy limits your growth. You can't negotiate promotions if you can't tolerate tension. You can't build deep intimacy if you can't express unmet needs. You can't lead if you can't disagree. And here's something subtle but powerful. When you avoid conflict, you don't just silence yourself, you distort reality. Other people assume you're okay. They assume alignment. They assume agreement. So decisions get made based on incomplete information. You become complicit in outcomes you didn't want. That's heavy. Now I want to flip something. What if conflict isn't something to avoid, but something to master? Not by becoming louder, not by becoming aggressive, but by becoming regulated. Conflict mastery isn't about winning arguments. It's about staying connected to yourself while tension exists. That's emotional strength. And this is where understanding this psychology gives you a real edge. In business, in dating, in friendships, in leadership, the person who can tolerate discomfort without collapsing or exploding has leverage. Most people either shut down or attack. Very few stay grounded. That's influence. Imagine walking into a difficult conversation and feeling your heart race, but not interpreting that as a stop sign. Imagine saying calmly, "When that happened, it didn't feel good to me," and allowing silence to exist without rushing to fill it. That's power. But it starts small. It starts with noticing when you say, "It's fine," automatically. It starts with pausing when your body tightens and asking, "What do I actually want to say?" It starts with tolerating the micro discomfort of someone adjusting to a new version of you, because they will notice.
When you shift from passive to clear, some people will feel it. The ones who benefited from your silence may resist. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the dynamic is changing. And change triggers uncertainty. Here's a question most people never ask themselves. If I stopped avoiding conflict tomorrow, who in my life would be uncomfortable? That answer tells you a lot. Now, I'm not telling you to start fights. This isn't about confrontation for ego. It's about alignment. Alignment between what you feel and what you express. When those two match, anxiety decreases, resentment decreases, confidence increases. Because confidence isn't loudness. Confidence is self-trust. And self-trust grows every time you act in accordance with your internal truth, instead of overriding it for approval.